Story 1. Once I booked an Airbnb by myself in Arizona for a job interview far from home. Since it was such a distance, I made a short trip out of it. I chose this specific Airbnb because it cost much less than any hotels I could find. It sat about half an hour away from my interview location, which was fine with me. The place was off a secluded dead-end road and offered a nice desert view from the backyard. I brought my laptop to work remotely for my current job during the day, keeping me busy most of the time. My stay was for 3 days, with the interview on the second day, a Tuesday. I planned to leave Friday. On Monday night, the evening before my interview, I practiced questions for the specific company and gathered last-minute knowledge about their firm on my laptop in the little house's living room around 9 p.m. Then, there was a tap at the window. I say tap because it wasn't a proper knock. It sounded more like someone's finger. My head instinctively swung left to look at the window in reaction. I saw no one, but it was also pitch black outside. I was scared to look, but felt I had to be brave. There was no one as far as I could see, just darkness. Maybe it was a bug hitting the window. We have some large bugs here. The next day, I completed my interview feeling I did well. For the rest of my trip, I explored different parts of town in my car, ate at various restaurants, and relaxed in the sun in the backyard. Little did I know, I was likely being watched while in the backyard. That night, I was inside watching Breaking Bad on Netflix when it happened again, a single tap at the window. Now it was obvious it wasn't a bug. I was even more disturbed, but once again rushed to the window. Seeing no one didn't mean someone wasn't out there. I checked the windows by the front door, opened the door, and looked outside briefly. Finding no one, I went back inside and then to the back door. I stepped outside onto the back porch and looked out towards the desert behind the house. Silence and darkness. Then I heard a click, a sound like someone clicking their tongue against the roof of their mouth. It came from off in the distance, beyond the house's light, somewhere out in the cold desert. I felt like someone could be hiding behind any number of bushes, watching and toying with me. I yelled out, and almost in response, there was another click. I pinpointed the direction it came from and looked that way. I could see someone now standing not too far away, dressed in dark clothes, blending into the desert darkness. I started walking a little closer, then stopped, realizing I didn't want to get nearer. I called out, "You're on private property. I'm going to call the cops if you don't leave." I saw the person walk away eerily fast. I theorized it was the Airbnb owner, though that was a stretch. I didn't know what to think. The following night, I was in bed on my laptop watching Breaking Bad again before sleep. I think I watched 2 episodes, so I did this for about an hour and a half. I heard no noises in the house, though I was definitely thinking about the earlier encounter while watching the show. When I finally turned off the light and tried to sleep, within 10 seconds there was a click sound again, muffled from inside the closet. I looked at the closet door, which was open just a crack. In a natural response, I sprang off the bed, still in my PJs, and ran to my car. I sat in the driveway with the car running and called 911. I stared at the house while speaking to the dispatcher, waiting to see if someone would emerge because all my stuff was still inside. A police car arrived. Upon entering the house together, we did a quick investigation. It was very small with few hiding places. Conclusively, I still packed my stuff and left that night for a nearby hotel. I contacted both Airbnb and the host, only managing to get a partial refund for my stay. I still think it might have been the host. Who else would have access? No signs of forced entry lead me to believe whoever it was had a key. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a stranger snuck in at an opportune time. Story 2. My wife Cheryl and I have been together for 10 years, married for 2. We just got a house together less than a month ago, and things couldn't have started worse. We moved to a small inland Georgia town called Wozers. That's all the details I'm giving to avoid issues. We're on a quiet street with a big property in front of a medium-sized patch of woods, which really appealed to us. We plan to adopt a dog and raise kids here, so we wanted a large property for them to play on. We work similar shifts. I get home around 5. She gets home around 6 most times. The first 2 nights were completely normal. It was the weekend, so we spent the days unpacking. It wasn't until Monday night, maybe 20 minutes after we turned the bedroom lights out, that blasting music suddenly sounded from the backyard. Our nearest neighbors are spaced out enough that we couldn't mistake their music for something in our yard. It was definitely in our backyard, and it wasn't party music. It sounded like very old, staticky vintage music. The windows were shut. After Cheryl and I exchanged horrified glances, wondering where it came from, I opened my window. It was much clearer, some song sounding like it was from the 1940s, blasting. I later found out by looking up the lyrics that it was "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" by Henry Hall. It had a slight eerie vibe, even though meant to be happy, but listening to it from our backyard was downright horrifying. We were still learning the house, but figured there must be a backyard light switch downstairs. I ran down to the back door and flicked the switches next to it. One turned on the backyard lights. I saw no one. I opened the door. The music was louder, but as I walked onto the grass, I realized it wasn't coming from the backyard, rather from the woods. The song played to completion as I stood in the yard looking around. When it ended, silence returned. It seemed like a stupid housewarming prank, but it wasn't appreciated. I went back to Cheryl, telling her it was probably just kids trying to scare the new people in town. Hearing myself say that, I realized how stupid and weird it sounded. Why would anyone do that? The next night it happened again. Minutes after we turned the bedroom lights off, music started blasting outside, much louder this time, playing Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Cheryl and I looked at each other in genuine disgust and worry, hoping it was a one-time thing. I looked out the window and saw something on the grass. Not a person, but definitely something. I told Cheryl I'd check it out. She said we should call the cops. I said we would in a second, going out with the mindset to establish myself as the man of the house. When I was in the yard, I saw the object was smaller than I thought, but the blaring creepy song came from it. I realized it was an old radio. I turned it off, looked up at Cheryl watching from the window, held it up, and yelled that someone left it to scare us. What she did next shocked me. She started screaming my name to run inside, kept screaming run. I yelled why. She screamed back, "There's people standing behind you." My heart skipped a beat. I turned to face the woods and saw 3 figures standing about 6 feet apart, clearly facing me. They weren't running, just standing there. I yelled, "Oh shit," and ran back. Inside, slamming the door, Cheryl was upstairs hysterically crying. I told her I'd call the cops, and did. They arrived thankfully not long after. While scared of knocks, we desperately explained the situation to the officers. I showed them the radio on the ground, asked them to take it as evidence, saying I only touched the handle, which they did. They checked the edge of the woods with flashlights, probably as a deterrent. When they left, we felt vulnerable and scared again, but thank Christ the people never returned. This was only weeks ago, though God forbid they come back. I'd try to get it on video. Story 3. I've worked as a nurse in multiple hospitals before my current one. Previously, I worked at a geriatric hospital 30 minutes from home. Having experience with older patients, this wasn't new. I'd only been there a couple of weeks. You'll soon see why on my second or last shift, unbeknownst to me at the start of that night, I was working the graveyard shift running on negative sleep, assigned to the Alzheimer's ward. The patients there adored me. My presence as a young woman in her 20s among residents often left to themselves was, I'm sure, a breath of fresh air, someone tying them to the present. When alone, you mentally drift, but with someone else, you're anchored to that moment. I was dealing with several patients that night, but one, Lena, my first night with her, was more restless. She kept telling me, every time I entered her room, about voices she heard and a man dressed in black she saw in the corner. The other lady in her room had requested her curtain be closed before my shift, so Lena would leave her alone. She was sweet, smiled when I was around, but didn't say much and was very forgetful. Since my shift started around 9 p.m., most patients were asleep by 11 o'clock, but not Lena. Whenever she called me in, she was frightened of the alleged voices and the man in black staring at her. Not going to lie, it was creeping me out. I believed she was experiencing these things in her mind and sympathized, knowing they must be scary. I tried my best to calm her and get her to sleep. I avoided turning on the TV to be courteous to the other patient. I held Lena's hands, told her it was okay to breathe and relax, reminding her she wasn't alone and I was always a call away. This seemed to work. Lena relaxed, and the next time I came in, she was asleep. Once most patients sleep, the night slows down. Time almost moves in reverse. An hour or two later, I was in the small, dead quiet linen room, stocking my cart with the door closed. That's why hearing another noise was weird. I turned, saw nothing, and resumed stocking. Then I felt what I can only describe as a hand on my shoulder. I looked, jumped, and screamed, but there was nothing there. No one in the room. Yet, I knew I felt something large grab my shoulder. I went into the hall for a second to peek. No other nurses in sight, dead quiet. I had nothing else to do but resume. I continued stocking the cart. When full, I turned to face the door and fell to the floor screaming, my heart in my throat. A man dressed in black was standing outside the door, looking through the glass. Smiling, my screams were loud enough to wake the ward. The man disappeared from sight seconds before the door opened. A fellow nurse came in to help me up as I was hysterical. I asked if she saw the man dressed in black. Her response, "What man? There's no one else here." We checked all the rooms. No one dressed in black. My screams woke Lena. When I entered her room, she started talking about the voices again. This time, the screams, which she didn't know were mine. I asked her what the man in black looked like, if he was smiling. She looked at me, eyebrows pointing down, expression changing to the most focused I'd seen her all day. She asked, "How did you know?" Even with my heart racing, it skipped a beat. She started screaming now, "Get me out of here. He's coming." Other nurses came in to calm her. I was switched to a different ward that night and eventually went home, early, traumatized. I texted the head nurse the next day that my next shift would be my last, that the experience traumatized me, and I didn't want to be in that building anymore. I got as friendly a response as possible. I've never been diagnosed with anything nor dealt with hallucinations. I know the effects of lack of sleep, but this was next level. I don't know if my mind played tricks because of what Lena told me, but the feeling of the hand, the image of the smiling man matching the patient's description multiple times. This was a once-in-a-lifetime unexplainable supernatural occurrence. At least I hope it was once in a lifetime. Story 4. I was driving home from work one night, taking my usual route. I got out at midnight, so it was probably 12:15-ish. My town is quiet and boring. Lots of woods, not many people or houses. I was on a road not far from my house, with a cornfield on one side and woods on the other. It was midsummer, around 75, so I had my convertible top down. I was cruising down the street going about 50 when I heard a loud, blood-curdling woman's scream from one side of the road. I couldn't tell which side. I slammed on the brakes and listened. There was a woman's cry from the left side, in the woods, crying for help. I got out of my car, grabbed the baton from my back seat, and walked towards the woods. I called out, "Who's out there?" The woman immediately called back, "Please help me." I began running into the woods, swiping twigs and bushes aside. I yelled for her to keep screaming so I could find her. Every 10 seconds or so, she'd scream, "Help," and I'd approach in that direction, running and yelling back. But pretty soon, I realized no matter how far into the woods I ran, the woman's yells didn't get closer or louder. If anything, they stayed the same distance away, even though I was booking it straight towards the screams. I screamed out, "Me, where you are?" About 5 seconds later, the woman just screamed help. Again, I stopped in my tracks. I didn't like this. I felt like I was walking into a trap. I turned around and started running back the way I came. I ran until I could see my car's flashing headlights beyond the trees. The whole way back, I still heard the screams, but they remained the same distance away, as if she were following me. Was I being stalked? I got in my car and drove away, completely freaked out. I called 911 to report it. I wasn't sticking around. After telling friends and family, I was ready to move on. But a week later, I saw something on the news that made me sick. The dead body of a woman in her 30s was found in those woods by a man hiking with his dog. Oddly, no signs of foul play. The location reported was the same general area where I heard the screams. While that patch of woods is large, I can't help feeling that would be a huge coincidence. Story 5. Before my girlfriend Jenny and I officially started dating, we hung out constantly. We both snowboard, and her family has a cabin-type house in Vermont near Stowe Mountain Resort. This was around our 10th time hanging out. She invited me up for a weekend to go snowboarding together. It was a 5-hour drive. As we neared her place, we spent half an hour on a very windy, secluded road, passing driveways leading to properties blocked by trees. We were way up in the mountains. Seeing other cars was rare. It felt very isolated. Many driveways lacked tire marks in the snow, meaning houses were empty. Jenny said that's because many owners lived out of state, like her family. I was going about 30 when she yelled to slow down. It was coming up. I hit the brakes, and a little opening in the trees. I'd have missed appeared. We drove the narrow trail in 4-wheel drive to a small snow-covered house, looking incredibly cozy. We parked, first turning the heat on. We unloaded our stuff inside. Since it was getting dark, we cooked some packed food for dinner and watched The Pursuit of Happiness. The house had heat and electricity, but no running water. Her family had jugs for washing hands and dishes, but no working toilet. She told me we had to use the outhouse outside. I only had to pee that night, so I just peed off the front deck into the snow. It was snowing. We fell asleep during the second movie. We woke early for fresh snow on the mountain. After breakfast, getting ready to drive to the resort, I had to use the outhouse. Running out in my shoes, my feet started freezing. On the way, I saw footprints in the snow, kind of big, but I couldn't tell if boots or animal prints. I followed the trail. It wrapped around the house and went into the woods. I called Jenny out. She said probably a black bear since they're everywhere. I did my business, and we set off for an 8-hour run. Afterwards, we ate at a diner and returned to the house. By then, it was pitch black and snowing again. We set up a fire, blasted music, and started drinking. Eventually, I had to pee. Since I was putting boots on anyway, I decided to use the outhouse again. I ran out into the snowstorm to the outhouse, slamming the door shut to keep snow out. I heard the blasting music from inside, but then over that, I heard the crunching sound of footsteps in the snow passing the outhouse. Jenny, I yelled, no answer. The footsteps just walked away. I had my phone, so I texted her, "Are you outside?" It didn't immediately deliver due to poor reception. Minutes passed. I was still in the outhouse. I was about to finish when the blasting music suddenly stopped. Pure silence, minus snowflakes hitting the ground. As soon as I stepped out, I saw pitch black. The house lights were off. I figured maybe the power went out. Using my phone flashlight, I noticed fresh footsteps leading to the house. I followed them to the front door. They seemed to stop, then continue around the house. I banged on the door, yelling Jenny's name. Suddenly, the door opened, and an arm pulled me inside. It was Jenny. She slammed and locked the door. She whispered that a man tried to open the door right after I went to the outhouse. Scared alone, when she saw it wasn't me, she cut the power and hid in a corner in the living room. She watched in horror as a stranger walked slowly past the living room window, looking inside. I came to the door minutes after this. Jenny told Me about a secret cellar in the floor where her dad kept rifles and a shotgun. Navigating in the dark, I found the handle, lifted it open, climbed down the little ladder, and grabbed a gun off the wall. We waited on the couch in the dark, afraid to turn lights on and expose ourselves. The closest neighbors weren't nearby. Jenny said it wouldn't be them, and they likely weren't even in Vermont now. Again, only the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground, until the sickening sound of footsteps in the snow returned. I took the loaded gun, marched to the front door, opened it, and shot 3 rounds into the air, screaming. The footsteps stopped. I imagined they ran off, the shot echoes masking their retreat. We left the next morning on her father's recommendation, not to stay there then. They weren't worried about theft, so we just got out. At least we got our full day of snowboarding, and a horrific night was definitely an experience. Story 6. My name is Howard. I'm 25, living on my family's farm, helping when my parents are out of town. It's a small family farm, not commercial. My parents want me to take it over as the oldest of 3 and the only son, but honestly, I don't want to. I don't see myself staying in rural Arkansas my whole life, especially after something weird last July. My parents were on a week-long romantic trip, so it was my sisters, Crystal and Morgan, and I taking care of the property. There's not much around here, lots of privacy, a little too much, in my opinion, except for one night. It started late, approaching bedtime. My sisters do college online. Crystal takes summer courses, so she was in her room on her laptop. Morgan and I were hanging out watching a dumb show in the living room. All 3 of us kind of want out of farm life. Me, especially in my prime 20s. One dreaded part is the predators. Not just animals eating produce, but people stealing. It happens. We have a few guns for this reason. Our 2 dogs outside suddenly started going crazy in the backyard. Something spooked them. I went outside to see. They were barking madly. Towards the crops, I yelled at them to shut up. They went quiet. I stepped in front of the crops and listened. I heard whistling from inside the cornfield, undoubtedly human whistling. This was my first trespasser experience with Dad not here. I hurried inside to get a gun. The dogs started barking again. I told my sisters someone was outside in the cornfield. I had to chase them away. They both said that was a terrible idea to run into the dark cornfield. They knocked sense into me. I realized how terrifying that would be. Instead, I went back out to the dogs barking crazily towards the crops. I aimed the gun into the air and fired a shot, echoing into the night, silencing the dogs. I was on a power trip, screaming, "Get off our land," as loud as I could. I felt that did the trick and went inside. My sisters laughed, causing me to laugh too, but our laugh didn't last. The dogs started going crazy again, even crazier. I went back outside, ready to repeat, but my heart skipped a beat when I saw a guy standing about 20 feet from the dogs, right in front of the cornfield. He looked at me. I screamed, "Hey," at which point he ran into the cornfield. I started running over and fired another shot into the air. I stopped by the dogs. No way was I going in there. I wasn't leaving the dogs out either. I unclamped their chains and brought them inside. I told my sisters someone was sneaking around. We called out Dad. He told me I had to be the man of the house and protect my sisters, recommending I fire another warning shot if they came back. We gradually went to our rooms. My sisters each took a dog to their room, and I took the gun to mine. All spooked. I had the window open. As I lay in bed watching a movie on my laptop, I heard whistling from outside. I hurried to the window and saw someone slowly walking in the grass. Then, like he had a sixth sense, he stopped and turned to look at my window, still whistling. This jerk was trying to mess with us and scare us stupid when I'd made it clear I had a gun. I ran to grab the gun, aimed it out the window, and shot at the grass a few feet away from him, purposely missing. This cut his horror movie act short. He ran out of view towards the front of the house. He didn't come back. He'd be a fool too. After that, I assured my sisters he wouldn't return. We never found out who it was or why. It could have been teens trying to scare farmers for fun, or it could have been an actually dangerous person. Story 7. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket called Great America in a somewhat rural town. It was the biggest, best supermarket around. My shift started as soon as the store closed at 10 p.m. I'd work until 3 a.m. latest, restocking shelves and organizing for the next day. I had keys for after hours. It was a team of 2, myself and either Terry Carter or Alfonso tonight. I was supposed to work with Terry. I arrived, let myself into the back where the inventory was stored, and started work. Using a pallet jack, I brought a pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor, starting with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating older loaves to the front. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area where we left our belongings. He wasn't there. I'd left the back door cracked open with a door stopper for him. I went back to work for another half hour. Still no Terry. I went back to the back of the store. He wasn't there, but I noticed the back door was shut. I assumed Terry was here. I went to open the back door and saw the door stopper was outside. Weird that he'd kick it out instead of bringing it in. I called Terry's name. It echoed. He didn't call back, so I called him. He picked up sounding like he was in bed. I asked if he was at work. He said he wasn't coming in because he was sick. Suddenly, I got chills. I told him someone kicked the door stopper off. He said it could have come undone itself. Nobody else was scheduled. I told him to feel better and hung up. I wasn't convinced the door stopper came undone. I'd kicked it under tightly. I did a quick look around the back to make sure no one was there. Seeing no one, I went back to work. Though uneasy, I was finishing stocking the bread when I heard a loud sound echo from across the shopping floor. Okay, now someone had to be here. I got off my knees and went to the center aisle, intersecting all others. I stood there looking straight down, all the way across the store. In the dairy aisle, a man dressed in black walked past the middle aisle. Looking down in my direction, my heart dropped. It felt like that scene from Signs where the alien walks past the birthday party. I tried to think logically. Maybe someone else was filling in for Terry, and my boss didn't tell me. I started speed walking down the center aisle, yelling, "Excuse me," very loudly. I looked left down every aisle I passed since he'd gone towards the front. In one of those aisles, he was waiting at the end, standing fully facing me. When he saw me, he walked out of sight towards where I'd just come from. I yelled, "Excuse me," again and ran down that aisle to catch up. I didn't get a good look at his face. At the front by the cash registers, I looked down the direction he went and saw him all the way at the end by the bread aisle. Half his body was hidden behind the shelf, his mouth hanging open. He started waving me over but didn't say anything. His face freaked me out. I attempted one more time. "Who are you?" He disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't paid enough for this. I went outside to sit in my car and call my boss. He picked up. I told him there was a random freak roaming the store. He told me to get him out or call the police. I wasn't attempting to physically remove a crazy person, so I called 911. I waited in my car until a police officer arrived. I greeted him and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around. We saw the man again in an aisle, creepily standing there as if playing a game. When the officer commanded him to come here, he actually listened. He was handcuffed. The strangest man I'd ever seen kept smiling and looking at me non-stop, licking his lips, with huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke to the officer, he was looking for a snack. I didn't like the way he looked at me as the officer walked him out, a menacing, threatening smile I haven't forgotten. I continued my work after that. Needless to say, I never left any doors open again. Story 8. A long time ago, maybe 8 years back, 2 friends and I, James and Sean, did something really stupid. But back then, stupid things were how we passed time. We're not friends with James anymore, but Sean and I still talk often, and we often discuss this story. We were 19, living in New Jersey. Lots of vacant houses in our old town. Atop a hilly road, not far from our houses, was an abandoned church locals knew about. It was on a closed-off road, abandoned for years. I'm not sure if it's still standing. I live in Florida now. James, Sean and I, being troublemaking thrill seekers, came up with the genius plan to bring a Ouija board to the church late one night. It was October, so I guess for spooky season. Sean had the board in his closet, so he brought it. I drove us. I picked up James, then Sean, and we drove straight towards the church. Since the road up the hill was blocked off, we parked roadside and walked. We followed the road up using one flashlight at first, to not draw attention. At the top, we all turned on our flashlights. The church was surrounded by woods on all sides, with a gravel parking lot. It had been broken into countless times, littered with graffiti, so the big front door was already ajar. Two of us had to work together to pull it open because it scraped the floor. Inside, we naturally looked around with our flashlights to ensure no one else was there. It was definitely creepy at night. Sean set up the Ouija board, then pulled out 3 candles from his backpack, saying it would add to the experience. He placed them in a triangle around the board. As they were lit, we turned off our flashlights. Now the only light was from the candles, creating a much more eerie, uncomfortable vibe. We couldn't see more than maybe 6 feet around us. We began playing. Sean did most of the talking. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he definitely opened with, "Is anybody there?" and typical Ouija questions. The planchette started moving. We started laughing. I knew it was one of them doing it. Playing with friends. Someone always jokes around. We went along. Whoever was moving, it spelled out a few words. As this happened, we heard a weird crack sound from the church's altar, best described as a big piece of wood cracking in half. It was loud and sounded deliberate. We all jumped and hurried to shine our phone flashlights towards the altar. No one was there. I think we were all freaked out, but the place was old and falling apart, so weird noises weren't that crazy. We kept going. We all took turns asking questions, but the planchette stopped moving. I think because that crack sound freaked us out, and now we took it seriously. This went on for some time, until another sound from the altar broke the silence. Before we could shine lights again, something landed on the Ouija board, causing us to jump and scream. It was a rock about the size of a golf ball. All 3 of us had our hands on the planchette seconds ago. None of us could have done that. We all got up, ran screaming out of the church, leaving the board and candles behind. We ran down the hill, to my car, fearing we were chased, and didn't stick around. I drove us back to James's house. We sat in the car for half an hour talking, wondering what happened. Sean is very religious and superstitious. He was confident we reached a spirit. I don't believe in that. I think someone else was in the church, equally terrifying. Sean went back with James the next day to get his Ouija board. To make it stranger, the board was missing, but the candles were still in place. Seeing it missing from the entrance, they left right away. This remains the single scariest experience of my life. Story 9. Years ago I did the night shift at a gas station, strapped for cash and needing a second job. I worked nights there for a few months. Around my 2nd or 3rd month, this guy started regularly coming in very late, always around 2 a.m. He was about 6 feet tall, had long stringy hair. He'd always come in, buy a tall boy, and leave. After a while, one night he asked my name. I told him, Rob. He kept saying Rob. I liked that, laughing to himself. He cracked open the tall boy he just bought, walked out of the store talking to himself, clearly hammered. That night I was curious if he drove. I watched him leave. He walked out of sight, off the gas station property. That made sense. He never bought gas, only alcohol. I saw him almost every night after that for a while. He'd come in some nights noticeably drunker, sometimes just leaning on a shelf, not saying anything. He'd always greet me with, "Hey, Rob." One night he was leaning on a shelf, drinking the tall boy he just bought, staring at a wall. I asked his name, finally. He looked at me, took about 5 seconds, and said, "Bob." I felt Bob was a go-to fake name. I said, "So Bob, where do you work?" He laughed so loud it startled me. He said he doesn't work, that the government completely fucked him out of his job. I got the vibe he was wasted. He looked at me angrily, but said, "I like you, Rob. You seem like you know what you're doing." I didn't know what that meant. He walked out right after. I didn't see him again for over a week, which for a regular like him was a while. Bob always gave me a mildly creepy vibe. Usually drunk, but something was wrong in his life. Or one very stormy night with fewer customers, I heard the ding of the front door. Before looking, I imagined Bob, and when I looked it was him but a much scarier version. Completely soaked. No rain gear, just a dark shirt and jeans. Long hair, drenched. He stood by the door, staring blankly ahead at the wall. He looked angry yet zoned out. It freaked me out. I said, "Bob, are you okay?" He didn't move. He stood still and said, "I did something really bad." I asked, "What did you do?" He then looked at me, said, "I need somewhere to hide," walked past me towards the restroom hallway, disappeared behind the wall, and I heard a door open and close. I was genuinely uncomfortable now. Something was extra off. He seemed like a zombie, and the "did something bad" comment was incredibly creepy. Time passed. Bob never came out. I assumed wasted, passed out, or puking. I didn't want to intervene. Then the next thing, the lights cut out. The store was pitch dark. I was standing in a dark gas station during a major storm with an unhinged drunk man. I used the counter flashlight to head towards the back near inventory storage and the panel. Board the door was in the same hall as the restrooms as I walked by. Both restroom doors were ajar. Bob wasn't in either. I went through the door to the back. I planned to go to the panel board but stopped when I heard dripping and the squeak of wet shoes. My heart sank. I said, "Bob," in a scared voice. I heard squeaks right to my left, pointing my flashlight there. Bob was in the corner, eyes wide open. He lunged at me screaming, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I pushed him off as he clawed at my back, ran back to the front, grabbed my rain jacket, and ran straight to my car. I sat in my car dialing 911, stayed on the line. Police arrived quickly. I went back in with them. Bob was still huddled in a corner in the back room like a rabid creature, pupils huge. I only noticed then he was on something. They took him to the station after I told them he lunged at me, threatened to kill me, and stated he did something really bad. I found out over a month later, Bob's real name was Martin. He had brutally beaten his ex-wife to death. Possibly that same night he came into the gas station. Long story short, I never wanted to work another night shift after this. Story 10. One night when I was 19, I was working at a nearby pizza place to pay for food and gas. The job was easy. Take orders, box food, bag it, drive to the address. I'd done it countless times. Nothing weird ever happened. Tips were usually $3, $5, sometimes $10 plus from generous people. I remember this order was just a chicken palm hero and a slice. Smaller orders meant lesser tips. I had no choice in deliveries. On my way to the address, the house was on a dead-end block with a rural feel. One house had an RV on the grass with woods next to it. Others looked like farmhouses. More space on this street. I pulled up to the address, a small, weird-looking house with a huge property next to an abandoned house with overgrown grass. It was around 6 p.m., getting dark. People usually put lights on, but all lights in this house were off, and the front door seemed cracked open. I began walking to the front door and heard a piano playing, muffled by walls or a door. I knocked, then rang the bell. The bell didn't work. The piano kept playing. I felt weird walking in, so I walked around the property to the back. The backyard was a mess. Things scattered everywhere, even a broken rusty chain-link fence sitting in the middle. I went to the back door, knocked loudly, looked through the glass, saw only a messy storm room, clearly not neat freaks. When nobody answered, I went back front and called the pizzeria to confirm the address. He checked and confirmed I was correct. So I went back to the front door, pushed it open, and heard the creepy piano music still playing. I yelled, "Pizza's here." The piano stopped. Someone yelled, "Over here." Then the piano resumed, playing a simple yet creepy repetitive song on loop. No lights were on, making it hard to see. The smell inside was musty and off-putting. Walking straight in towards the music, halfway through the foyer, I felt very uncomfortable. I wasn't going further. I yelled, "I'm by the front door, sir." The music stopped for good this time. Silence. I backed towards the door to be closer to outside, expecting footsteps. "None," I said. "Sir." A voice from another room said, "Yes, sorry. I have trouble walking. Could you just bring it in here, please?" I asked. "What room are you in, sir?" He took a moment. "If you just walk through the living room, I'm in the dining room. No delivery directions mention this." Very strange. I thought about my next move, feeling bad it might be an old feeble man in a messy house. I started walking. Through the living room, there was an opening to what I presumed was the dining room. Being overly cautious, instead of walking straight in, I peeked around the wall just enough for one eye to see. I saw the piano, but no one sitting at it. I also saw no one in the entire room. With that, I quietly but quickly walked back to the front door, shut it behind me, and drove back to the pizzeria. I explained the sketchy vibe. My boss understood, especially since the alleged customer didn't call back asking why I left. That said everything. I didn't understand the logic of trying a robbery in your own house, nor did my boss or co-workers. Later that night after work, I looked up the address. The house was foreclosed on months ago and had been vacant. When I told everyone, they had the same mouth-dropping reaction I did. I was truly mere steps away from probably getting robbed, or someone playing a horrible prank on an unsuspecting pizza guy.